trying to cope, not focused on shit. Always scoped on the fix that is fixed to our wrist. And the cyst that persists from the clicks that we get is a ship that's adrift in the midst of the grift. What a trick, what a gift. What I miss? Shit. Ignorance is bliss. Bliss. Welcome to the realm where they complicate pursuits. Confiscate the truth to indoctrinate the youth. Got us hopped up on the juice cause the doctor's about the loot. Posture of imposters cause our options are acute. Playing possum for the boot. It's lost in the obtuse. You constantly and constant for the optics you can prove. Animosity's the obstacle that obfuscates the view.
All right. Welcome to the third episode of the new Dystopia podcast. I'm your host, D-Web, and unfortunately, Amy B can't be joining us today. She has a prior engagement, so salute to Amy B. She will be back next episode. But on this podcast, we seek to take a deep dive into the topics and underlying causes and effects that the mainstream intentionally or unintentionally ignores. And today I'm highly honored to have as our guest this episode. She's a veteran, a YouTuber, an educator, free thinker, homeschooling advocate, and most importantly, a dedicated mother. And I am grateful to have the unflinching, that's a good verb right there, Deb Fillman, who has accepted my gracious offer to come onto the pod and have a discussion. Is it Deborah or Deb? How do you like to?
I usually go by Deb. I mean, my actual name is Deborah, but I go by Deb. And if anyone calls me Debbie, I'm like, who? I don't answer to that one.
I almost asked your preferred pronoun, so I had to catch.
Oh, dear God, no. Her Highness. No, I'm kidding.
So I'm grateful and highly honored you came onto the pod. I know I've been following you for a while on the Twitter universe, the Twitter space, that wonderful positive place they call it.
So positive, yeah.
Yeah. So, and I'm like, oh man, like your tweets are like dope, and and I kind of noticed, more so drawn toward the educational type thing and everything with like what's been going on the past year and a half drew me to that. And I seen that you had a YouTube channel. So I'm like, oh, that's dope. Like, okay, I got to get you on and talk to you because I love to talk to people, particularly if they have maybe differing backgrounds, because it's kind of interesting when we came to the same conclusion. I'm a freaking Chicago delinquent, so but I got it together later on in life, ended up with a couple degrees, went to school, went to the military, so I'm a veteran as well. Salute to you. And then it's just that differing background, yet we come to the same conclusions when regards to what's going on now. So I think that was dope, and I'm like, I got to reach out and get you on. So
well, I appreciate that. And what you just said proves that the things they're trying to teach our kids right now are false, because you just said, we come from completely different backgrounds and yet we arrived at the same conclusions. Probably, if I had to guess, because we are independent thinkers who decided to inform ourselves and draw our own conclusions and not follow the herd. And so it doesn't matter where you start, it's where you end up. And that's the thing that we all, especially in the United States of America, have the freedom to do. And so I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here, but I noticed just by your introduction, I'm like, this right here, this conversation is a microcosm of what message I'm trying to get out, which is that teaching kids any kind of determinism, that where you start will define you, and all these is just so wrong. I would go as far as to say it's evil, because it holds them back. So, but what, do you want to know like about what my background is?
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna start with. I was like, okay. I thought you was about to go in. I'm like, I'm not gonna stop a good rant. I love a good rant.
I said, I feel like I should loop back to that when we get into some of these topics, because I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves here. But I just had to point that out while it was fresh.
I got you. So yeah, since you hit on it, let's get into your background. Who those may not be know about you or may not subscribe to you on the Twitterverse, or may not be familiar with your YouTube channel, give us a little background on yourself.
Okay, well, I'm I guess you would say sort of a native New Yorker, although interesting, I was born outside of Chicago, but moved before I was 3 back to where my dad grew up, which was New York. And I had the kind of upbringing that, some people would probably call privileged on paper. in that, you know, I got to go to like little Montessori school, private school until my parents got divorced. And then they had the pretty typical suburban divorce. And then I went into public school, but it was in a really nice town where everybody thought public schools were good. I, as a little kid, it was a shock. I hated public school because I liked my little Montessori school. And then we moved to New York City and I went away to what we call prep school, which is like, you know, one of those fancy private schools. I picked my own. So I picked the unfancy kind because I, even as a little kid, was like the anti-snob. It's just not in me. And my dad used to joke around and he'd say, you have this affinity for people from the other side of the tracks, is what he would say. And he didn't say it in a mean way. He said it in a complimentary way. He actually, I think, liked that fact about me, that it was just in my nature to befriend anybody who was nice to me. And, you know, I didn't have a ton of friends, but if you were a nice person and we got along, I couldn't care less, like where you came from, where you lived. It was just not in my nature. And so when he said, okay, now we're moving to the city and your choice are these schools in a building, and it's all rich kids there, right? Really, like way richer. We weren't rich. We were like upper middle class. So I went and visited some of the schools and I was like, ew, you know, it just felt really like super snobby. So I started looking at schools that were boarding schools, and I picked one that was, you know, it was in a town. So it wasn't in the woods, in a pretty little campus and everything. And I liked the fact that I could still live in the world. Like I wasn't tucked away and I could walk to the store and I could have a life like regular kids had, where, you know, there's like a neighborhood, even though you're sleeping at school. It's kind of a little different. Plus I wanted to play sports, and at some of the fancier schools, I wasn't going to make the team. I mean, these kids have been playing since they were, you know, kindergarten, and I started in 6th grade with soccer. So I went to this prep school and I finally started to learn. Like I wasn't getting good grades in public school, and I went to private school and I was like, wait, this is what school is? Like you actually have to study and do your homework, you know? And because my dad always said, he's like, you're an underachiever. You could do better. And I failed my first test and I had to do something called Friday night study hall, where they make the kids sit like in a room with a proctor watching you and your friends are going out. And I'm like, I'm never doing this again, you know? And I started to study and I started to learn and I started to come alive. Like, oh my gosh, I've been ripped off from 4th grade forward. I was just totally ripped off. I just felt this feeling of like I was robbed, you know? Yeah. And I dove into everything and I had not, you know, not all good teachers, but some really good teachers, kind of old school good teachers. And I loved it. So fast forward, you know, went to college. College felt like going backwards to a degree because now I'm in college with all the kids from public school. Yeah. And I'm, you know, a freshman. I'm like, let's go. Here to learn. Let's do it. Right. And the kids are coming in like drinking, partying, you know, and I was just
college, it's college. That's what college about, right?
Right. And I'm just kind of like, wait, y'all realize you're paying for this, right? You know, like, so right. took a year abroad and lived in Austria. And this was because I was studying German as my foreign language. And I'd had this obsession almost with like the Third Reich in Germany and like what happened, because I grew up Jewish. So I was like, why would people do this Nazi thing? Like, why would they do this? Right. So when I had an opportunity to go live there, I'm like, I'm going to go live there. I want to see what these people are all about. Like, why? And ask questions and learn and speak the language and get in there and like figure this out. And I did. I learned a lot, but that was in the 80s. So there was also this thing called the East Bloc, right? Remember like East Germany and Yugoslavia and all these like Soviet satellites. Yeah, and I visited them too. And that also affected me. That made me like so grateful to be American. I was like, wow, I'm not just lucky to be getting this good education, but I'm getting this like education about how lucky I am to be a free person. I can say what I want. And I can, you know, learn what I want and have a hope of having the job that I want. I'm not going to be told what to do. So when I finished college, wasn't sure what to do, bounced around for a couple of years doing different jobs. I even was like a pastry chef for a little while. I worked in retail. I did a bunch of different things. And then I decided to go back to grad school to become a teacher, because I remember thinking, you know, when I went into public school, I hated it. I was miserable. I didn't learn. So I remembered that experience so much. And I said, not every kid's going to have the luxury of getting this like private school rescue plan that I had. And I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to go teach in public school and I'm going to just make this difference. And I went to University of Pennsylvania for a program that would get me my master's and certification at the same time, because my undergrad was not in teaching. It was in American studies, so I had like history, literature, all that stuff. And then I taught in 2 different schools during my time there. I taught for a whole year. My student teaching was not just like a few weeks. It was a whole year. I was in West Philadelphia, which if anyone is not familiar with West Philadelphia, it is a very impoverished urban area of Philadelphia. What?
I'm thinking about the Fresh Prince in Philly is where I spent most of my days. You make me just
right.
Think about that.
And that West Philadelphia, born and raised. Okay. So that's where I was. I was in a kindergarten class, and the population of the school was 100% Black. It was not like partially, it was 100%. And I was in this school, and what an eye-opening experience that was, as far as like how much these kids needed of everything, like just like winter coats, a toothbrush. I mean, they needed so many things. So I had that experience. And I also did some teaching out in a sort of a suburban, like it was a private school, but it was like a Quaker school. And they had a lot of scholarship kids. So Philadelphia is a diverse area. So even in that private school, it was a very diverse school. And I got kind of both sides of this, right? And I'm teaching and I'm loving it. And I'm learning all different ways to like work with the kids and help them and connect with them and all this stuff. And my focus was teaching them to read, because I love to read. And I thought, once you know how to read, like the world is your oyster. You can learn anything. It doesn't matter where you start. You can read books and you can go places, right? You can even travel just reading a book. Like, wow, cool. But in my classes, I was miserable, because what I was seeing in the kids, then I'd go into my graduate school classes and they'd be telling me all these things about my kids, like the kids I'd be teaching, like, oh, what you need to know about them is, and this is in 1989, 1990. So a good while ago. And they'd be telling me about them like they were like what we're starting to hear today with some of the rhetoric. Like my job was to save them, not educate them, like save them. And I'm thinking, I can get them a winter coat, and I can teach them to read, but I don't think is like, I'm not their mom. I'm not their dad, nor should I be. I'm just the teacher. There's like a boundary there between me and their family and their community. I can't cross that. That's not my job. Yeah. And yet they wanted me to get all up in their business. And they had us read Pedagogy of the Oppressed, which is a book by a guy named Paulo Freire. He was a communist. And it was all about social justice and the oppressed, and, that we're teaching and we have to push for social justice, and that teaching was a political act and all this. And I'm like, whoa, wait, what? So suddenly my dream of I'm going to be a school teacher, teaching kids to read, write, and do math. And I'm going to just make it more fun and interesting, because I'm going to really care. Like I felt like my teachers didn't really care. So I'm going to go in the classroom and I'm going to care about each individual student. In fact, I had a big journal, and I'd sit and I'd take notes on my students. So I'd really get to know them, not like so much their hobbies and stuff, but more like, how do they learn best? Like what lesson is working well with this kid? So even though I'd have 15 or 20 kids in the classroom, I was trying to individualize it as much as I possibly could, because they wouldn't let us track. Like you don't have like the fast, the slow. They're not allowed to do that anymore. That was the old days. So now you have to go all the kids in one room, but not everybody goes at the same pace. So I knew that was going to be hard, but I said, that's your job. It's hard, but that's your job. Like that's who's good at the job is the person who could do that. And who's not good at the job is the person who treats everybody exactly the same. Like, I'm teaching it one way, too bad if you're slow, and I had that done to me. And that's why I fell behind in math. I'm like, I'm never doing that to somebody. So I would try as much as I could. And then I'd like, offer the parents, I'm like, you need some help after school. I'll help you, whatever. Well, my first job after graduate school, I was out in Chicago area. Actually, I moved out to Chicago. I was out in Winnetka. And it's a union area, right?
Right.
And I'm doing all the same stuff. And they said, you can't do that. I'm like, why? I said, because you're making the other teachers look bad. That's not what we do. This is the lesson. This is what you do. This is the curriculum. And I'm like, but it doesn't work.
You're too good at your job is what you got. So,
but they don't say that. They say you need to follow the formula. You're only 1 year out of grad school. You don't know what you're doing. And this perpetuated like for the whole year. And for those who don't know, if you don't make it through 2 years of teaching in public school, you can't get permanent. So after my first year, they're like, well, we're concerned that you're not nurturing enough. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? I mean, they just given me feedback that I'm paying too much attention to individual students. Now they tell me I'm not nurturing enough. I said, what do you mean? They're like, well, your manner, it's too, you talk to them like almost like they're adults. I talk to them just like this. And like, that's not appropriate, watch. And they gave me an example of another teacher there. Did you see how she teaches? And she was this kind of teacher where, and I'm like, that's not me. That's not my personality.
And you know what, just not to cut you off, but that just sounded almost like, had you seen the Kamala talking to the kids? And
yes.
Well, oh, this is a telescope and it looks at things that's far away. And yeah.
I'll tell you what, because I remember I'm one of those weirdos who remembers like being 3. I shouldn't say weirdos. My friend Barbara remembers like being born, but but there are people, that's a little exaggeration, but there are people who remember their childhood memories like really vividly. And I do remember many of them. And the one thing I hated was fake people. Those adults, they're like, oh, you're so precious. And you're like,
look at his little cheeks. Look at it.
And the people I liked the best were the adults were like, hi, how are you today? And sometimes, the grownups that would like give you their hand to shake their hand. Like, I like those. I was like, hey, how's it going? So I wouldn't say I liked being treated like an adult, but I like being treated as like a person.
Right.
Like I wasn't someone's pet and I wasn't like this little baby. I was, treated like a person. And so I always talked to my class, like by their names. First of all, I always use their names, and I made it a point day 1 to memorize all their names so I wouldn't make any mistakes. That's a big thing with kids, is the last thing you want is the teacher was like, what was your name again? Oh my God, that's so annoying. So I memorized all their names. And then I would talk to them and be like, Steven, come over here. I want to show you something, and I talked to them just like, and the principal would come by and she says, I just don't like how you speak to them. You're just too, you treat them like they're much older than they are. And I'm like, I don't even understand what you're talking about. I'm just being myself. Well, long story short, they sent me over to the middle school because they said elementary school is, you need to go work with the middle school people. Now I'm 5'1" maybe, and I'm 55 now. And this is when I'm 23. So most people look at me now and they're like, you don't really look like you're 55. Well, imagine me 23. I look like I was maybe 15. Okay. So they send me over to the middle school and they have me, try out teaching. And the principal's like, you just look younger than they are. Like you look like them and I don't think you can manage the class. I'm like, but I am. But I just don't think you just look. I'm like, you're literally commenting on my looks. I just taught the class and you watched me do it. So I don't know if my principal had badmouthed me or what, but I was that person throughout my life, even when I left teaching, because after that I left teaching. I said, forget it. You guys don't want me. You're shoving me to the side. You're blacklisting me all over the place. Like, well, she's got opinions of her own, is what I later learned. They were telling everybody about teaching. And she's not a team player.
Free thinker over there, that free thinker.
Right. So I went into private sector. I did HR. I did a bunch of things that were sort of a little bit like teaching, but not quite. Right. Used the teaching skills as much as I could. But I was that person throughout my career, no matter what job I went into. I was that person was like, anyone else notice the emperor's naked? Like, he's naked. Am I the only one, Obviously you wouldn't like say it like that, but you'd be sitting around conference table, the clients there, everybody's, I was in consulting at one point doing like website design stuff. And they're all like, yeah, your business plan's awesome. It's going to do this. Well, it's gonna be great. This is like right before the dot bomb. And I'm sitting there like, well, how are you going to make money? And they're going, we just showed you our business plan. I'm like, yeah, I see what you're going to do and what you plan to sell. But what I'm not really understanding is how you're going to actually get people to buy. And I'd ask questions like in a nice way, but I'd be the one getting dragged into the office, or like a conference room later by the account manager. Like, you need to stop. You need to stop. And I'm like, I thought that our job was to help the client be successful. They're throwing money at us. I'm like, but they're going to fail. It's never going to see the light of day. This website is never going to see the light of day. Or if it does, it's going to be like a week and it's going to fail and not make money. So fast forward, I lost that job. I ended up working in a paint store. Like I was so, I was that person where people are like, you don't want her. She's a annoying.
Yeah,
So
you're on the
I figured,
list.
screw this. I'm gonna go mix paint. So I'm working in a paint store. It was fun. I mean, really, I was helping people pick paint colors. It was fine. And that was at the same time I got married and I started having kids. It was my late 30s, whatever. At that point, I realized, well, I have these skills. We're living on one income. I'll just homeschool because I've always wanted to homeschool. I see what goes on in the public schools, just with the academics, just with the teachers being like, she makes it look bad. I thought to myself, do I really want my kids in a class with a teacher who's worried that the teacher next door is making them look bad? Like, I don't even deal with this. I'm a teacher. I know I could do it. I'll homeschool. So started off homeschooling my own kids, homeschooled them until unfortunately I got divorced. So they made it through to like third grade with my eldest, first grade, and then kindergarten with my youngest. And unfortunately, I was court ordered to put them in school. So they went to school and I was fighting up until COVID to get them out. They were begging to come out and we would try every year. We talked to their dad. We try to talk to lawyers. We talk to different people. They'd be begging and crying and pleading because they were getting bullied. They were having academic issues, all kinds of problems. So I've been involved and very vocal about problems in public school since my kids had to go to public school in 2012. So my concern about some of the trends goes back that far. And I was trying to raise awareness with just peers locally and family and people like that and saying, I don't like what they're doing. I'll give you an example. Went to tour the public school I had to put my kids in. It was a neighborhood public school. Oh, everybody loved it. Oh, it's such a great school. They take us around to the lunchroom and say like, oh, look, the kids who bring their lunch are sitting properly. And I said, what do you mean they're sitting properly? It's only the first week of school and they're already sitting properly. And they said, you see how they skip a seat between them? Well, they do that so that the free lunch kids are not stigmatized that they have a lunch brought from home and they're saving a spot for a free lunch kid to come sit with them. And I thought to myself, you're literally trying to orchestrate their social life. Like they have 20 minutes for lunch. And you adults are projecting your own insecurities onto these kids.
Big facts.
My kids came home and said, how come we can't have the lunch in the cafeteria, which you could pay for, right?
Right.
But I wanted to make them like healthy little lunches. And I honestly didn't have the money. So I'm like, I don't want to do this. And we're not free lunch qualified. So, and they're like, pretty please, can we buy the lunch? It's so embarrassing to be one of 12 kids that brings their lunch from home. So the adults totally didn't get it. That having lunch from the cafeteria that you buy was the status symbol, you know, the pizza, the burger, the French fries, the junk food, not the homemade turkey sandwich on whole grain bread. I'm setting for home. But just the fact that they made such a big to-do over it was kind of crazy. Then my daughter comes home in tears one day and she says, Mommy, they called me a boy. I'm like, I'm sorry, what? And she said, well, they had us sit boy, girl, boy, girl, boy, girl. And so I went and I sat down and the teacher came and grabbed me by the shoulder and said, what are you doing here? And like pulls her back and says, you need to move. And she's like, why? She's like, this is a seat for a girl. She's like, I am a girl. Because her hair was short. Her hair was like a little bob haircut. And she used to wear her buttons like buttoned up tight. And she, you know, walked, you know, very like this, very, very tomboyish. She was very tomboyish. She still is. And they said, you're a boy. So yeah. So that's, I mean, my background is just dealing with like my own childhood, then my teaching in school, my work experience, and then my own children has just kept me feeling like education or the lack thereof, because in those work experiences in those companies, what I kept feeling like was these smart people with these college degrees who work in this company have no principles. They don't understand. It seemed to me like that they're actually cutting off their own nose to spite their own face. Like they think they're doing something good because the client's going to give them the money today. But when this project fails, which it did, everyone I said was going to fail. And it's not because I'm so smart. It's because common sense would have told you that. They were just dollars. And I kept thinking like, no one taught them to think. Because I'm sitting there asking questions like, well, what about this? And what about that? And have we thought of this? And have we thought of that? And no one else was asking questions. And so I kept thinking, I'm going to teach my kids to ask questions. I'm going to teach my kids when I have kids, I'm going to teach them not to take things at face value, to look deeper, not to just take someone's word for things. So like I was making mental notes.
Critical thinking.
That, there's a cost to not thinking. And that doesn't have to go with a degree. There are people, you can have a piece of paper, but it doesn't mean anything about what's up here. That's why I referenced at the beginning of the conversation. I'm like, you and I are a great example of how what you do with this that you have between your ears has a lot to do with your choices. And has a lot to do with how you see yourself. And it doesn't have as much to do with like that thing in the frame on the desk back there. I put it there to remind myself that it, like, and it's not hanging on the wall. It's just propped on a desk because it's of no more value to me than those books.
Big facts.
The books are actually more valuable. And that's kind of my message in general, is that education is not necessarily what happens inside a school. It doesn't even have to happen in a school building at all.
Exactly. And once again, like I said, backgrounds probably couldn't be any different between me and you, even like just upbringing, size. I'm like 6 foot 220. So just everything totally
I'm like
different,
this big.
But we can both see the same thing. And I grew up as a public school victim, I like to say, but I was taught to critically think for some reason. Like I was always, and then one thing I always point out, because I had discussion with somebody and they were referencing how their kid just needs to go to daycare, right? Your kid needs to go to daycare because you got to go to daycare because you get the socialization. I'm like, well, I never went to daycare. I never went to pre-kindergarten. My auntie, one day I was sitting there watching like Sesame Street. My auntie was like, whoa, you need to go to school. And they took me to kindergarten and I passed everything with flying colors, the colors, because I didn't go to pre-K. So they had to give me the test and I aced it. Right. Went through, and I noticed very early that this is just basically a regurgitation exercise. Right. And I was always great at regurgitation. Right. To the point where I like skipped 4th grade. I'm just flying through grades. Right. And then it's like, I see what this is. Even as a small child, I could see like, okay, we're supposed to go here when this bell rings, right? We're supposed to sit here. We're supposed to do this. And once you reference the Philadelphia experience, going to a school that's, 100% Black. I think we had one mixed kid in my whole elementary school. One. Right. So it was very different. Like we sang Lift Every Voice, and actually one of the few Black people that knew that song before they started pandering the hell out of it, because the school I went to, you sung that song. So I seen all of this, right? And then I had the opportunity because, I had good grades. I had, I was able, like I said, to regurgitate and spit things. I could memorize things very fast. So I got the opportunity to go to a very good program, a good school program in middle school, upon which, like, that's when things kicked in. That's when things changed, right? I was supposed to went to this program that's supposed to put middle schoolers into a high school program, right? South side of Chicago. So here I am, and I didn't have a growth spurt till sophomore year. I'm all of 4'10", 100 pounds, right?
Oh my God.
And I'm in there with high schoolers. And they have this gifted program, but they also have this projects that's down the street. And you got kids, and I'm from the west side of Chicago. This is the south side of Chicago. So I'm
very different.
Very different, right?
Yeah.
So, and automatically, even just from you being the west side, it's totally different gangs than the south side. So it's like, oh, you're automatically this and that. So I'm in this school, like getting high schoolers taking lunch money type deal, right? I had to deal with that. It's like, oh my God, this is a totally different experience. While I was the smarty pants in elementary school, now I'm the, give me $1 kid so I can buy, So I seen both sides. And eventually I told my mother, she pulled me from that school. I went to a different school, and hit high school, got my growth spurt, fell in with, the cool kids, right? Right. So I seen both sides of the spectrum of the kids that's getting bullied and the kids that's doing the bullying, right? And I can tell you right now, the only thing that I learned in terms of knowledge from school is how to dump, how to memorize and dump, and basically that it's a dog-eat-dog world. You're not getting these social skills that are making you a better person when you're going to these institutions, particularly if it's not an institution that's up there, right? That's upper echelon. You're basically learning that the world is a crappy place and you need to do what you have to do to survive it. I don't think that's a great lesson to learn.
Well, especially because the world and school are not the same.
Not the same. not the same. You're not going to have the same. And that's one thing too, that I try to instill in any kid I talk to, is that half of these people that are like the bane of your livelihood when you're in middle school, when you're in high school, you're probably not even going to talk to them once you're grown. Like these 4 years seem forever. It's like this much time in the grand scheme of things. Yep. Right. And the lessons you learn there, you're not really learning anything. You're not gaining. And I had the fortunate ability to go to a technical high school. They still had wood shop. They still had auto shop, drafting, things of that nature, things that are practical value.
Skills. Yeah.
Skills that you can actually use. They turned that high school into a college prep. You're an educator and you know what college prep means. We're going to teach you how to take standardized tests so you can go to a higher institution.
As if that in and of itself is of value when you have no idea what you would do at that degree.
No idea. I even sometimes curse people like, you don't have to go to college. Like if you want to take a year off, that's fine. But I think one of the worst things you could do is go into depth, not knowing what the hell you actually want to do.
100%.
And now you're stuck here with a degree in history, or a degree in liberal arts, liberal studies, or something that you can't really do nothing with, but you've wasted all this time and opportunity. That's one thing you can't remake is time. Once time is gone, it is gone forever, right? And that's time you could have been actually learning a tangible skill. Right now, if you look at what's in demand, it's actually the trades. The trades are the ones picking up the money right now. And I even had my little brother, he came to my mother, me and my brother about 11 years apart. Like she waited a long time before she had another kid, but he was telling me like,
made an impression on her.
And he's a total opposite of me too. But when he was growing up, he told me he wanted to be a mechanic, right? He told my mother he wants to be a mechanic, right? And she was like, he told some family members and all this stuff, and they kind of laughed it off like, oh, mechanic, you better go to college, I'm like, what? Like, the kid, like if he's good at his hands, if that's a skill he can use that anywhere. Not only could he get a job at a shop fixing cars, he can do it on the side to make money. I know people making plenty of money enough to live by just doing side jobs.
Yep.
So to discourage him, like this form of education is so much less than this form of education, that shows the indoctrination. Your story was kind of funny to me too, because it seemed like your biggest crime was being conscious, right? Your biggest crime was not being indoctrinated enough, right?
A story of my life. I don't know how I got the way, except, well, that's not true. I kind of do. I grew up in a family where my dad and both grandfathers were lawyers. And they were the old school, like almost Perry Mason kind, although they didn't do the criminal law. They did more like litigation, but my dad went to court. Right. And so dinner at our house was court. So like if you had an opinion, and of course, when you're a teenager, you got loads of opinions, right?
Right.
So you'd be sitting around and be like, this thing is really a big problem. I noticed. And my dad would be like, why? And I'd say, well, because it's a problem. People should be more, why? It's like it didn't matter whatever I said. He'd be like, where'd you get that idea? Why do you think that? What would you do instead? Why do you think you would do that? Would you even know how hard that is? So, and there was a period of time where I started watching like Nightline and, those shows on PBS where the people are arguing and stuff. I don't know why I was always kind of interested in that. And I would say to my dad, like, we should do something about this problem or whatever it was, Middle East or something like that. He's like, who is we and what do you want us to do? And so the great thing about that was I got challenged. I mean, really challenged about my opinions, my ill-formed opinions when I was 12 or 13 or 14. And I just throw stuff out there. And between him and then some professors or teachers that I had who were similar, who wouldn't take just your half-baked ideas, you had to really argue. You had to explain. And it wasn't I wanted to win. It was like, my dad made me curious because he would ask enough questions. I'd be like, I don't know. I actually don't know the answer. And it bothered me to not know. So I think there are kinds of people who are bothered by not knowing things and they're curious and they want to know more. And then there are people who are like, no, I'm good. Like, I don't need to know this. And, I don't mind that. The world takes all kinds of people and you don't have to be interested in everything. I guess I wish there were a little more humility though, in the sense that, people who aren't interested in a topic or don't know about it or choose not to know about it don't form opinions about it. Like don't say like, that doesn't interest me and I don't know about it. Then you don't go out on Twitter and go, let me tell you what you should think about it. It's like,
let me tell you what's wrong with society.
So we used to be a kind of world where, I even still remember where people would still say, I don't know anything about that. Like, I don't know about that. That was an okay thing to say.
Right.
And it didn't make you stupid and it didn't make you, boring or anything. It was just, that's not my topic. I don't talk about that. I'm not interested in politics or I'm not interested in this. And, whatever, they just wouldn't get into it. Or you would talk about something else. Like, you want to talk about sports? I don't know about that. Okay. So I'm not going to voice an opinion about college sports. I don't watch college sports, but something happened, whether it was, I don't know if it's social media specifically, or maybe it's TV, but it's 24-hour news for sure. As soon as there was this cable thing where you could have opinions thrown at you and news became infotainment, I think everyone felt like I have to have an opinion about everything. And I'm very grateful. I feel really lucky that I grew up in a period that didn't have that, because I never felt pressured. I had opinions. All teenagers have opinions about all kinds of things, but I never felt pressured to have an opinion. I never felt like everyone around me was forming strong opinions about current events or social issues or anything. We were just being kids, and most of our opinions we have around our little life and that we were living. And it wasn't until I was, even out of grad school that I started feeling like, well, I'm an adult. I should probably have an opinion on this stuff, right? But before that, any opinion I held was because I chose to be curious about it. I chose to investigate. Exactly. I think what's happening in education now is that, just like I told you, was starting to happen when I was in grad school and was continuing on, when my kids were in school and I'm looking over what's going on, is they're not only pressuring kids to have opinions, they're telling them what the right opinions are that they should have. And so that kind of, I don't know if we're like ready to go to this topic of like, why did I start a YouTube channel? But that's kind of what brings me to that answer.
Was roll into it.
Okay.
Let's go.
So, okay. I just said, things were moving with education, and I started seeing the indoctrination ramping up and up and up, and it started getting more and more political, more, the politics coming into the classroom really peaked, in my opinion, when Donald Trump was elected. And it was bad before that. But when that happened, I had moved my kids from that public school they were in to a charter school. I was like, oh, I'll get them in a charter school. Maybe they'll be a little bit better. Right. Mm-hmm. And at first it seemed like it was a little better. It was smaller. I felt like the teachers were more accessible. I saw what the curriculum was. I thought it turned out to just be a front. It was kind of like, we're going to teach American history. And I was like, oh, good. And that turned out to be a lie. And then he got elected, and my eldest daughter, or my middle daughter rather, comes home, my eldest daughter in that school. She came home and she says, Mom, you're not going to believe this. Because she already kind of knew my opinions on some things. Mm-hmm. She said, they lowered the flag to half mast today. Wow. I said,
for election?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I said, did someone die? I'm so naive. I'm like, did someone die? She says, no, because Trump won. She said, and the teachers came to school wearing black. They were dressed in mourning, and they canceled the morning classes so they could sit and have sessions with the kids who wanted to talk about it. And one little boy who was 8 years old, was bawling his head off, terrified that some nuclear war was going to start imminently. And the teacher, actually it was the principal of the school, went up to him and said, oh, buddy, yeah, I feel you. I understand. It was like hugging him and like, oh, you poor baby. Like, do you want to have a timeout and go in another room? And I'm thinking to myself, and she tells me the story. I said, what did you do when all this was going on? She said, I just sat there like watching these people, like, what the heck? She's at this point, she's like 11. And she's going, I didn't even know what to say. And, I voted Libertarian that year, so I didn't vote for him. And I woke up the next morning, I was like, what? I thought Hillary's going to win, So when he won, I was kind of going, okay. I was pleasantly surprised in the sense that I knew the Libertarian wasn't going to win. I knew Johnson wasn't going to win. But I was like so pleased that Hillary didn't win. And then I see he won, and I went, well, this will be interesting. And I even made a video at the time for Facebook. I was just made one for my friends saying, hey guys, I know some of you didn't vote for him, whatever, but let's give the guy his 100 days. Let's see what he's going to do. This will be interesting, right? I treated it like this could be interesting. But school then got to be this dystopian nightmare for my children, where science class became full on global warming every single day. It was almost like they felt like they were in crisis mode because the president was not the person they wanted to be president, and everything suddenly changed. And the following year, when my middle daughter went to the middle school that was associated with the same school, it got an order of magnitude worse. First week of school, we go out to dinner and sitting there having burgers. And she goes, "Hey, Mom," she, got this giant burger. She goes, "Is Publix a racist grocery store?" And I'm like, and I'm sitting there going, "I'm sorry, what?" Like, she's like, "It's Publix, the grocery store we go to is it racist?" And I was like, where did you get this question? Like, why are you asking me this? Well, my teacher for Quest, which is what they renamed science or whatever, she's like, "My teacher says that it is." And I said, "Oh, that's interesting." I said, where'd he come up with that?" And he was this like super crunchy liberal white guy. And she says, "Well, we've been studying food deserts." And I'm like, "Really? Food deserts in science class?" Okay, then. And she's like, "Yeah, so," and I said, "How long have you been studying food deserts?" She goes, "Since the first day of school." And I'm like, "You've been there 2 weeks." It's like you've been studying food deserts for 2 weeks. I said, "Tell me what you've been doing." She says, "Well, we watched this video." She goes, "It's on YouTube." So I look it up and I'm seeing this total propaganda video. She's like, "We watched this video and then we had a guest speaker and then we had this, we had that. And then he said that the new Publix that's going in your dad's house," because they split time, is being put there because it's a rich white neighborhood. And that's the only reason they're putting it there." And I said, "Interesting. I see." So we go home from the dinner. I got out my laptop and I go to Publix, website. And there is even a place on Publix website that tells you how they do their site selection for grocery stores. And believe it or not, it even said in there, like, "We are very careful to not create food desert," or something along those lines. Right.
All right.
And they said about how they draw a circle and the demographics and all this. So I took out the map and I drew a circle. This took 5 minutes, by the way. I drew a circle and I said, "Okay." And on this little MapQuest map, there's the circle they're talking about. Do you see, what neighborhoods do you see? I said, "There's your house with your dad. There's your school." And then we started looking. She goes, "Oh, that's Shamrock Gardens." I'm like, "Yeah. Who lives in Shamrock Gardens?" She goes, "Yeah, they're like mostly Black people. It's like almost an entirely Black neighborhood." And I said, "And who lives over here? And who lives over here?" And I go, "Who goes to your old school? That's like right in the neighborhood school, not the charter school. Who goes to that school?" She goes, "Oh yeah, we were the minority." I'm like, "Yeah. Remember that? When you were in the 30% and the 70% were brown, remember that?" And that had anything to do with like why we left the school. But I mean, that was a very diverse school. Okay. And I'm like, it's right there in that neighborhood where all these people live and can shop. And it's on a 4-corner intersection where you can come in from like all different places. There are 2 different bus lines. And I'm like, "So do you think it's in a racist, white, rich neighborhood?" And she goes, "No." And I'm like, "So what are you going to do when you have to go back to class tomorrow? What are you going to say?" And she goes, "Well, I'm going to tell him it's not, that's just not true, whatever." So she goes to class and she tells the teacher that this isn't true. And he argues with her. So now I'm pissed. So now I go on the little parents Facebook group and I says, "Anyone else have this experience?" Whatever. I get a note, no joke. Within 10 minutes, I get an email from the principal of the school. Wow. My posting in the private parents Facebook group for the school is gone. And she goes, "I'm very disappointed in you that you would not come directly to me and have this conversation instead of, attacking one of our teachers." Wow. I'm like, I simply asked if anyone had this issue with this teacher. Well, everybody knows you. I said, I didn't even name his name. "Well, he's the only teacher we have for that subject." I'm like, and I knew this. I didn't know this. And so she was very bent that I had singled out. I said, "Well, okay, well, I think we need to get to the heart of the matter that you have a teacher teaching the students that a grocery store chain, which by the way, has a COO who is Black, is a racist grocery store chain." And I'm like, and this information took me 5 minutes to find. Wow. I just Googled it. There it was. and she's like, "Well, I think you're missing the point of the lesson. It's very important." Blah, blah. And I just was like tuning her out at this point. I'm like, "Are you done? I gotta go." So that is when it just started to get crazy. So when the pandemic hit, I was very worried because they went to the virtual learning, and I'm looking over their shoulders and going, this is crap. Like, just content wise, it was bad already. They were having political walkouts every other day. Black Lives Matter came in the class. They were chanting, moving stuff around. This is before the pandemic. They had Black Lives Matter coming to the school. And they had a guy from the friggin' Palestinian something liberation, blah, 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 coming and talking all about how, Israel's a bad place. So then they're doing this. And this is after, by the way, my middle daughter had to leave the school for psychological reasons. She got bullied so bad. She had to leave school before the pandemic. She had to leave. She refused to go back. She told her father, you can't make me. I will bad things. You can't make me. So she came out, and it's tragic that it had to come to that, because I told him, if you leave her in there, this is what's going to happen. Right. So bad things were going on at school. So then the pandemic hit. I looked over my youngest shoulder. She was the only one still in there. My eldest had already come out by choice. She's like, I'm done. And then she says, Mom, look at this work. I'm 75 assignments behind. I said, how do you get 75 assignments behind? And I look at this long list of things as busy work. It's like, do this game, play this puzzle, do the. I said, okay, you have my permission to do none of that. No, you don't do none of that. That is stupid. Do none of that. And she's like, are you serious? I go, yeah, there is absolutely zero value in that. That is the teacher trying to keep you busy so nobody notices that she's not teaching. I said, you do none of that. And she's like, for real? I said, you just totally fail, absolutely fail 6th grade. I'm down with it. So she just stopped. She just stopped doing school. And instead I was like, I'd rather you watch documentaries, do anything else. Well, then this past year, she was 7th grade, and now 8th grade, she's been homeschooled. But I started the YouTube channel because, on top of all the terrible content, George Floyd, the whole incident with George Floyd happened. My kids are all home, so it's not really happening to my kids. But initially, when everybody was like on board, like, this is terrible, then it kind of morphed. You remember, it kind of like morphed from we're all in this together to shut up white people. It's like, so I thought we were finally going to make some headway with police reform. Like, really, as a nation, we'd have a serious conversation about police brutality, because I've been on board with that since Eric Garner. That's the libertarian in me. I'm like, you don't choke someone out over cigarettes and don't have a tax stamp. No. Like, that is so messed up. No. So, my libertarian bona fides are pretty solid. And I've been talking about police reform for a long time, but this happened. I'm like, all right, it's horrible what happened, but can we finally have this conversation? And instead it became a racial thing. I'm like, but this wasn't, he didn't do it he was brutal and horrible, but he didn't do it because of race. It just, and it's turned into this conversation very fast, and seemed super organized. I'm like, this is way more organized. Like, what's going on? And I made a video for Instagram just saying, like, what are they going to teach in schools? And I got a pretty good response. And then I said, all right, I'm going to do a YouTube channel and start I don't know if anyone's ever going to watch, but I'm going to start just sharing my concerns about what's going on. And maybe people watch, maybe they won't. I don't know. So it started about a year ago, July, I want to say, I started doing it. And I started getting more and more people watching, And it was still never above like 1,500. I got to but that's pretty decent all by myself. I got to 1,500. Then some lady found me, the same woman, Carol, who she's been kicked off YouTube now because of her coverage of COVID. But she found me, and one night I just watched. It was literally like I'm doing nothing, and my husband goes, "Have you seen your subscriptions?" I'm like, "What happened?" He goes, "You just in the last hour gained 1,000." I'm like, "I'm sorry, right?" So I'm looking at the numbers just going up and up and up. So I go and I'm like, "What is going on?" It says Carol sent me. So I click the link and I see her doing a look. "Have you seen this woman?" And she's like looking at all my videos, like a picture of all my videos. And she's like, "You need to go follow that. This woman is trying to save education." And I was like, oh my God. Wow. So I got a big boost from that. And then between that and Karlin Borisenko, supporting me. And then I started to do Tom McDonald reactions, and people thinking I'm a grifter for doing it. But let me explain why I do it. I'm not a reaction channel. I did it one time only. I started it just as a request from a subscriber. "Would you please react to this song? It was Fake Woke or something, because I think it works well with your content." Like, okay. I'm not a rap person, but I'll watch it. So I did. And of course, my commentary about a song like that is going to be all about the education and cultural stuff. and I commented on it, and people responded, and I got all these subscribers who were like, I came for the reaction, but I'm staying for the stuff about schools. I got kids, I got a nephew, I've got this, I've got that. And so they asked me to keep doing it. So I kept doing it. And that's been helping me grow. And, I can't do it endlessly, but I did the ones that related to my content and that seemed to be appropriate to do given what's going on. And that's kind of how I grew the channel. But I've been trying to raise awareness because I really want to empower parents to believe in themselves and believe in their kids and believe they're not crazy. What you see happening is not good. It's not right. And like how your mom moved you. Remember when you said like your mom moved you to a different school because she saw something was not good enough for you or was not right, not the right fit for you.
Right.
I want every parent to be able to make that kind of a decision, to say, they're not the experts at my kid. Because have you noticed over the whole pandemic, parents are like, dude, my kid's going to be suffering. This is bad. That's bad. And the teachers unions and the teachers, and they pull up politicians are like, you're not the experts. We're the experts. Do what we say.
Word.
And it makes me so mad because I'm like, no, these are parents and their kids are not your kids. You don't own them. And I'm trying to get parents to see that they actually think they do own your kids. And it is the people they claim they want to help the most, the so-called marginalized, the so-called disenfranchised, the so-called underprivileged are the people they're going to hurt the most. People who don't have options are hurt the most. And it enrages me like nothing else.
Well, it's the white liberal savior complex.
100%.
That's what you're seeing, and it's so demeaning as a Black person to see what's going on. It's like you're the actual racist. I watched Eric July. Eric July had a guy on.
I love him.
Yeah,
he's awesome.
Dope, another libertarian. But he had this showed the video of the guy. I guess he was a college student, probably was in his mom's basement, but he's telling how we gotta, if you don't actively combat racism, you're basically advocating for it and all this, how we have to uplift the Black person. Like, who are you uplifting from your mom's basement doing YouTube videos, bro? Like, who are you oppressing? Like, you're like 5'8", 130 pounds. You can't oppress me if you wanted to. Like, it's just so. And I seen a post today, brother put up. It was like it was something about in regards to an article that was like, Joe Biden is losing ground with Black leaders. We're like, who the hell are these Black leaders? Like, where is my ballot? I never get a ballot to choose any of these Black leaders. Where do they come from? I'm still waiting on my ballot. Maybe it got lost in the mail. I don't know.
Do you know what my privilege is? Do you know what my privilege is as a white person? Nobody out there is speaking for white people. That's a freaking privilege. No, I'm dead serious.
It's a beautiful thing.
It is a beautiful thing. And I will not lie to you. I am grateful that when I hold an opinion, I mean, yeah, there's tons of people call me racist and people call me all kinds of names, but I am not expected to hold a specific opinion or vote for specific people for the dumbest reason that could ever be, which is something I had nothing to do with. And that's telling you what I look like.
You that your they're selecting who your leaders are. They're telling you who they think. And most of the time it's some entertainer, it's some panderer or some grifter they've chosen, some CNN pundit, some person who may have been.
Yeah, it's never Thomas Sowell.
Yeah,
it's not Thomas Sowell.
Oh, they hate him.
They don't want you listening to him.
God forbid you hear something about being self-sufficient or in
that's racist.
Yo, you can't. How dare you not want to be on welfare? You racist, But that's how we have to deal with things. I'd say one of the greatest atrocities you can do, or the greatest atrocities committed by people, are by people that think they know what's best for you.
100%. C.S. Lewis said that. He said that he would rather take a king, like a despot king, any day than an army of moralizing busybodies who are like, let me tell you how you should live your life and all this. And it is so true. the only way I feel it, I guess, is sometimes on occasion, and they don't do it anymore, because remember, now you're not even a woman, you're a person
You're a
with
birthing
with a
person.
uterus or whatever.
Yeah.
So a birthing person. So maybe, does that mean they won't come after me that I have to vote for a woman? Because that'd be good news. Because that was the other thing I hated, was like, well, you're a woman, you're a traitor to women if you vote for a man. I'm like, so because someone else has ovaries, like that makes him a good, it doesn't make sense. And I never got into this, like the first this or the first that. I'm like, what difference? Are they qualified for the job? Do they really want the job? Or is it like when they put up to the job, and I think, what's happening is such a disgusting disservice to children of all races, because their friendships are going to be damaged forever. Kids who might have grown up on the same block or played together as little kids, didn't think anything of it, are now being told that they should basically mistrust each other. And you've got, or second guess themselves or hate themselves or change themselves. It's really very similar to an abusive relationship or a cult. Well, abusive relationships are very similar to cults, and that how you get sort of inducted into it. They love bomb them with like, oh, you're so special and amazing and wonderful and perfect and this and that and the other, right? And so people who are emotionally kind of weak or fragile or don't have really strong boundaries are really sucked in by that. They're like, oh, that's awesome, they love me, right? The teacher's like, oh, I love you. And once you're all like comfy cozy in this, like they think I'm so special, then they start in with the like, come find yourself on the race wall. And they have the little Crayola crayons up there, and you got to pick your picture next. There's actually doing this in kindergartens. We're like, take your picture and find what color crayon you're closest to and put your picture there. And then they have a gender wall where it's like, put a pin where you are between like male and female. Like they put this big line, like there's all this area in between, and as if 6-year-olds know where to put themselves. So you're 6 and you see other kids playing pin the tail on the gender, and you're like, well, they put it over. Am I supposed to? I always thought I was a girl, but wait, what? So you're watching what your friends do. You're not thinking for yourself, because that's what they want. They want you to feel pressured by what other people are doing. And the weakest ones in the room are looking at teacher. This is good. Okay. And then the next weakest ones are going, all right, I don't want to get in trouble, so I'll follow that guy. And we're raising a generation of followers with no personal boundaries, who have tissue paper thin skin. They get their feelings hurt. I mean, look what's happening in Netflix. Dave Chappelle says something.
Oh yeah, I said that.
Not even that. I watched it. I was like, that's it. That's the thing. That's what he said. And they're outside. Oh, it's just it's so violent and whatever. And I'm like, that is not violent. Like we're teaching kids at work. Remember when we were growing up with like Sticks and Stones? I break your bones. At least that's when I was growing up. So I'd go home. Some kid called me a name. My dad would be like, so.
Exactly. It just hints at how first world problems. It's like we're facing an economic collapse. Energy is up. What, last I checked, 17% or so.
Yeah,
you're paying $5 for gas. You're paying astronomical prices for meat. You're paying more for everything. People are getting evicted. And your biggest problem is that some comedian on Netflix says some jokes. Like that's your Rock of Gibraltar. Like that's your
right.
You're storming the beaches of Normandy is David Chappelle, who makes fun of everybody.
It's so ridiculous. Yeah. And then people will say, the big thing now is like, there's you get a lot of noise around critical race theory, right? CRT. Right. But the thing that I'm trying to get across on my channel to parents is that, as bad as that is, and Ibram X. Kendi just said today that the only thing worse, he actually said, I think he said it was worse. I want to find the quote, than, like the racist was the not racist, that was worse. Or it was like, because he said, race neutral country. If you can't don't be a race neutral country, that was worse than. And I'm like, what happened? So CRT, which basically teaches that the world is divided into people who have power and people who don't. It's a zero-sum game. If somebody else has power, then someone else doesn't. Like there's not little bits of power to go around for everybody. And that power is actually a desirable thing. Like you should want power the way we would describe it over other people. That's a Marxist vision of power. The individualist and the sort of libertarian or more, not Marxist view of power is personal power, that I have power over me. Like I know who I am. I know what my strengths are, what my weaknesses are, my limitations. I know where I need to improve. I know what I want. I know the steps to get there or how to find out what they're like. That's personal power. You feel like you have personal autonomy and agency to change your life, that today might suck, but tomorrow could be better. It might not be perfect, might suck just a tiny bit less, but like there's a thing I could do that might make it better. And they reject that. They reject that. In fact, they say that that is racist, that is whiteness, that is from, that's just a concept that serves white people, which I think is totally insulting. And it's it's about power. And so white people have it by default, just by having phenotypically white skin, and Black people do not have it by default because they don't. And to me, that is racial essentialism. It is no different than what white supremacists teach. It's literally the same. And the only difference is the white supremacist says, and this is awesome, right? And the critical race theorist says, and this is the worst thing that ever happened. But let's think about this for a second. Let's challenge that. Let's give them their argument that the country is a white supremacist country. Let's give them that. This is what Charles Love always says. Let's say it is. Was it more or less a white supremacist nation when Frederick Douglass was a slave? Fair question, right? Was it more or less white supremacist than today? I think even they would have to concede it was more because he was property. Okay.
Right.
So so that's interesting. So he escaped of his own ability, right? He did that. And then he helped later as a statesman. He taught himself to read. He taught himself everything. He read the classics. He became a statesman consulted by presidents and elected officials. We fought a civil war to end slavery. The all white legislators of certain states elected Black members of the Senate, because, that's how it was done then. It was before the amendment that changed it to a direct election. So you had your state legislature would put people into the Senate, and they chose Black people. So all white people chose Black senators. And that was in the 1800s. And so that all happened. That all happened during Frederick Douglass's lifetime. And you admit that was more of a white supremacist nation than now. So is it really the worst thing that could possibly be if it was still, a little bit racist, like just not perfect, like we're still racist?
That's a theme. That's a common theme. Like the whole Jan 6 thing, right? That's the worst thing since it's always the worst, right? It's always the worst in previous.
And nobody ever questions it.
No.
Like nobody, because we haven't taught history for a very long time. So people don't have a perspective, and they will believe it. If CNN tells me this is the worst thing ever, then I have no frame of reference, and the schools want it that way. The schools don't. They say, we want to teach a true history. No, you don't, because you don't talk about Frederick Douglass. Because if you talked about Frederick Douglass, you would have to acknowledge the fact that he was a self-made man. And then if you acknowledge that he was a self-made man, then a whole lot of your narrative would start to fall apart about life for Blacks today. Right? If you had to acknowledge people like Thomas Sowell, if you had to acknowledge people like Clarence Thomas, if you had to acknowledge all of the people who were their own superheroes in a time that Condi Rice, who just said it on The View the other day, where she's like, I grew up in segregated Alabama. Right? So critical race theory to me is a lie. Its biggest problem, as far as I'm concerned, is you're lying to children. It's not a theory. Theories have to be tested to become even a theory. It's not. It's a conclusion. It's an opinion that forms a conclusion. All outcomes that are different are because of racism. All right. And then once we have that conclusion, now all we have to do is go find an example of an outcome to prove our point. So, but they never look at the NBA, do they? So they don't go to the NBA and go, okay, well, so is that racism? No, that doesn't count. Right. So,
but they say disparate outcomes don't necessarily notate that that's a racist thing. And one thing I've also noticed is that they hate independent or strong Black thinkers. You mentioned Thomas Sowell.
That's not allowed.
Earlier.
Stop.
You over the libertarian party. Y'all got Maj Toure over there. You got Eric July over there. I just did an interview not too long ago with Rhonda Mary, strong Black woman who preaches self-reliance and things like that. They hate those type of people, but they love the guy in the dress. They love the pouting girl, right? I seen something the other day, and it had it was a school. I forgot exactly where the school was at, right? And someone had wrote something racist on the bathroom stall or something, right? And so the kids organized a walkout. All these kids walked out of the school because somebody who knows what color this person is that wrote this random thing on the bathroom stall, right? It could have been somebody just wanted to get out. It could have been another black person wanted to get out of class. Who knows who wrote it? But they walked out of class and their demand was a black student union to deal with all the racism they're dealing with in school. And people were cheering this on. And I'm sitting here like, this is the most softball, cornball, softest pillow, Charmin tissue thing I've ever seen in my life. Instead of teaching these kids to have a backbone, because you're going to see, if you've ever driven or had a road trip where you stopped at a public restroom anywhere in this country, in any one of these little terrible little towns with these terrible little gas stations, you will read some of the most appalling things you've ever read in your life on these bathroom stalls.
Yep.
But these kids are so hurt by that they're walking out of class, and these adults are good job, yeah.
Well, because they want them to be activists. They almost don't care why they're angry or if there is a validity to the anger. They're trying to train little activists. They are actually not hiding it anymore. And they're coming out and saying that it is more important than the basic skills that they're supposed to learn in school is if they are able to be civically active. Well, what are you going to be civically active about if you didn't learn anything? You can't even read the policies that you're trying to put in place. It just doesn't make any sense.
And what's your goal? Action without a goal is a temper tantrum.
Well, and that you're so right. And here's the thing, that is the goal. They don't have utopians and cult leaders and people like that. The goal is power for its own sake. So we can, I don't know if you've seen the movement for Black Lives, if you're aware of what that is. You know what that is? Okay. So Charles Love wrote about in his new book, Race Crazy. And we talked about our interview yesterday. It is the most powerful Blacktivist organization that nobody knows exists. Black Lives Matter is just the little chaos arm of it. They're like tiny little Bush League compared to the Movement for Black Lives. Movement for Black Lives is a very deep website full of, they claim they have 170 different organizations that they're the umbrella organization for. They have policy platforms for just, 8 or 9 different things. They want to abolish police. They want to abolish prisons. They want to abolish to get rid of the family. They basically want to get rid of capitalism. And I'm saying basically, they say so. We're anti-capitalist, we're anti this, we're anti that. And they explicitly say it. So anytime somebody says, BLM is not really anti that. Yes, they are, because they're under the supervision. They're under the arc of Movement for Black Lives. And it's hard to find it. I mean, you'd have to type in like m4bl.org is like how you get there. And it's very obvious that whoever wrote this content, we don't know who they are. There's no names attached, but whoever wrote it, they've got lawyers, they've got policy wonks, they've got all kinds, or they've got one person who has all those skills. And there is one woman, she ran for Chicago mayor once. And the suspicion I have, because in her bio on Twitter, it says M4BL. I think she wrote this content because she's got a JD. She's got a degree in political science. She's got, what else has she got? She's got like 4 or 5 different degrees. She's got a master's in education. She could easily have written all the laws. She's got statutes written and ready to go. And they've got laws ready to go if they get in power in DC, and they can lobby them to pass these laws to get rid of prisons, get rid of it. I mean, like at the federal level. And it's scary. It's actually quite scary how powerful they are. They got a one-time gift at one point of $100 million. We don't know from where. And we know they've got more way. That's like the tip of the iceberg. So point being, they're very, very powerful people and groups that are backing what is that they claim they have a 5-year plan to basically take over the United States. Like they want to do away with our Constitution. And that's all they're saying that. I'm not making it up. You can go read it for yourself. But what they're teaching is they're teaching the values and the beliefs that would be consistent with supporting that website's content, not with continuing to support the Constitution of the United States. Our kids are, I just profiled some content last night on Twitter from New Jersey, where the kids will, for the first time, it's gonna be the first school ever in Cherry Hill, they're required to take African-American studies to graduate in 9th or 10th grade. African-American studies is BLM. They have a BLM directory, they have critical race theory and all that. So it's bad, but I want parents to understand that the way that kids are going to be indoctrinated into it is through SEL, social emotional learning. They're going to be giving your kids surveys and questionnaires to fill out. They're going to identify those independent thinkers that are out there in the class, and they're going to be given quote unquote targeted supports, which basically means they're going to be either branded racist, or they're going to be branded with having toxic boundaries or something like that. And they're going to be sitting there and doing therapy with them because they're not supposed to have their own independent thought. And it's all under the guise of, we want to prevent school shootings and we want to protect their mental health. No, they don't. They want to identify the independent thinkers and root them out, or root out their parents.
And it's funny when you I just looked at the organization real quick. It's funny when you see the same names associated with a lot of things. Ford Foundation, interesting. But
right, they're everywhere.
They are everywhere.
And what's creepy about that is that guy was a big old racist.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's funny how a lot of these people are big old racists. You know, it might be a certain person sitting in a certain office right now, maybe a big old racist.
Well, you know what my husband said? He goes, what if this is like the biggest 4chan fake out of all time?
I told Perry, you cannot believe your eyes right now. I say a lot of these things are not to get too much of my conspiracy bag, but this is a conspiracy but a lot of these things are pre-planned. And I also find it funny because I hate to go like a lot of these people go China, but you know who's not teaching CRT is China. They're teaching masculinity classes and things of that nature, right? They're teaching that, and there's no problem with them having nationalism. Nope. It's a great thing. It's a great thing. You do that here. Oh no, you're racist. Oh my. Oh, you putting a flag there. They're to the point where I seen one person put up a post talking about how she was so scared because she went to this park and I guess they was having some kind of rally and people had American flags and she saw trucks. Oh my God, trucks and American flags. Run for your life, right?
Are you afraid? It's to me too, like what I'm wondering is, how would you like to be, you know, a person who's a veteran and you're Black, and it's like, you know, oh, patriotism is racist. I mean, you're probably like, hi, you know, or just anybody who loves this country. There are plenty of people out there of other immigrants to this country who are like so grateful to be here and all this, and they see native born Americans, particularly white people, who are just the most self-loathing people. It's kind of gross. Like, I mean, I sit there and I watch them like you're sad. I'd be more angry if I didn't feel so sorry for you. Like, what kind of life is that? You know,
you notice they all kind of have the similar, you know, they kind of look alike. Like they all have this, because it's almost like it's bad to lift weights or something like, oh, you're a meathead, you know, or it's bad to exercise, or it's bad to, you know, be a masculine man, right? Everything is toxic when it comes to masculinity, right? So all of them kind of have the same look, if you see, like not really healthy, kind of paler skin.
The men in particular, there are plenty of Karens in like leggings. They're, you know, they're doing their little jog in the morning with the Starbucks, and then they want to tell you how anti
the Harry Styles type, you know, you see him and you're like, you look like, you know, it's just, I smell low testosterone going on, you know, and that's like a crime. It's almost a crime to be a masculine man. It's like, oh no, how dare you, you know? And exactly. I see that a lot. And like I said, meanwhile, China, hey, we need masculine men. To the point where they are banned, and nobody's saying anything about that when they ban a Harry Styles from the TV, or when they banned rap music, right? They don't even want, like, oh, this is preaching you know, promiscuity. I can't even say that word.
Promiscuity.
There you go. Too many syllables. But and they're like, nah, you can't have that. Oh, this is teaching bad morals and things like that. So to see the the different dichotomies, the different sides preaching one way. One side is like, yo, we need less masculine men. You don't need guns. Who needs an AR? Who needs that? You don't need that.
Guess they've never had wild hogs in their backyard. But I mean, here's the thing. Because I'm a live and let live kind of girl, like, honestly, I don't care. I mean, you're a guy, you want to wear a dress. I honestly couldn't care less. But here's the thing. You don't get to teach that to other people's children, that's like the right way to be. There was a point where they justified this by saying we need to destigmatize mental illness. Okay, I'm down with that. I don't want people walking around stigmatized or made fun of or afraid to go seek help. But we've gone way beyond the saying, it's okay if you're depressed, so you could get help, to putting I'm a depressed person in my bio on Twitter like it's permanent and it's it's part of my intersectional identity. No, having mental illness is not part of your identity. That's an illness. It's an illness. It's not like, the healthiest person is a sick person. It's weird. They seem to want to. And my daughter even said this in her last year of middle school, where everything went awry. Part of why she ended up anorexic, she'll admit this, is she was called normie so many times because she was like the one girl in the little girl friend group of hers that like didn't have a problem. Like some, thing like, well, I'm non-binary. Well, I'm actually bi. Well, I think I'm trans. Well, I've, got this problem. Well, I can't eat dairy and I've got these 17 mental conditions, whatever. And, I have bipolar. So it's not that she said, I'm going to be anorexic. It was just, she started feeling like really scrutinized and she started wanting to control something in her life. And she just stopped eating. Like, I'll control that because I can't control anything else. They were organizing the library books by victim group. They had books like, these are the refugee books. These are the books about rape victims. These are the books about this, like not alphabetical order, not anything else. It was all just your victim status was status. And when you teach people that there's some kind of cachet, there's some kind of like virtue in victimhood, it's not only are you preventing people from getting past actual trauma or actual victimhood that's real, but people can begin to believe there's an actual phenomenon. And they've studied it where people can start to believe that they were literally victimized just being near other victims or reading about victims. They internalize it. Why would you want your children to be taught this? Back in the day, during like the civil rights movement, when people had teachers who were, who had gone through, who were civil rights activists, for example, and they were their teachers. Like even Charles Love said this, his teachers were actual civil rights activists, that they taught about heroes. They're like, here are the, these are the Black people who overcame and they got through this and then whatever. And that is so much better message. Like if you're actually trying to teach people like, hey, you don't like things the way they are right now or where you live or what's going on in your life and stuff. But guess what? It doesn't have to be like this. You can do better. This can change it.
Yeah, definitely.
And that is so much more empowering than telling us like, well, it's always going to be this way. And I found that quote. Here's what Kendi says. The most threatening racist movement is not the alt-right's unlikely drive for a white ethno state, but the regular Americans' drive for a race neutral one. That's the most threatening racist. Is Martin Luther King.
How dare you want me to judge me by the content of my character? And
no, you're not allowed to do that. So yeah. So now because I know we're talking a long time and I know you want to talk about homeschool, right?
Right. Yeah. Like I said, it's free flowing. I'm trying to coax you into coming on again. I might have to.
Well, that's up to you.
Yeah,
if
definitely.
You want to do like another part 2, we can talk just about alternatives to all this lunacy. We can do that at a different time, but there are alternatives. And like I said, my channel is devoted to first and foremost, raising awareness and educating parents about why this stuff is a problem, because parents are being lied to. They're being lied to. They're being bullied. Parents of all communities. Okay. Right. So, if you're a Black parent and the teachers and the administrators are telling you like, this is going to help your child, this is what's going to help them succeed. I just would like people to ask themselves, how, like demand data Demand the evidence that teaching your child that their skin color is really meaningful in terms of their success or failure in life, to show how knowing that, even if it's true, like let's say it were true that people don't like you because of the color of your skin. Okay, let's give them that. How does knowing that and being told that over and over and over again make you a better reader? How does knowing that make you do better at math? Like, is that something your parents could tell you? Like, should your teacher be spending their time teaching you to read? And then like, okay, your community could teach you about the evils of racism. Like, I guess what I'm saying is I don't think kids lack for information about the fact that not everyone's going to like them.
Right.
Right. I mean, I was explicitly told that as a kid. My dad, like, almost never tired of telling me, he's like, not everybody's going to like you. It's like, it was just a thing. It was like, I'd come home in tears. This person was mean to me. And I mean, to be fair, he would say, I'm really sorry that happened. And that stinks. And nobody likes to have mean things said to them. But, it's just words.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean anything. They're not right. It doesn't make them right just because they said it. And I'll tell you the sad thing about, life, but it's okay. Not everyone's going to like you. But the flip side of that was, he goes, and here's a bonus. You don't have to like everybody either.
Exactly.
You get to pick. You get to pick who you want to be your friends, who you want to, date someday, who you want to marry. Like, you're not sitting around waiting for other people to like you. You're not sitting around waiting for people to choose you or to hire you or to do stuff for you. Like, to teach a child that you kind of, like you said, have to have a savior to come and rescue you is a terrible, disempowering message that I would like to believe, even if there's a parent who still feels like they have to have the talk or still feels like things are just not where they ought to be. And I can go there with people to a point. I still don't see how it benefits their child to be like marinating in this negativity.
It doesn't. And part of what you hit on too is that you had a strong family unit. People don't see that in totality.
At least my dad.
At least your dad. You had somebody who cared about you.
Yeah.
And when you were talking about how you were teaching in these schools in Philly, and you had these kids without coats, kids without, not necessarily nobody didn't care about them, but that may be how they felt, but when you have people, no matter what, that care about you, that in itself is a combat to the indoctrination. That is why you're seeing an attack on the family unit. 100%. That is purposeful, because you are powerful when you have people who not only related to you but care about you, and they don't necessarily have to be related to you. You can be adopted, but if you have people in your circle who care about you and want to
role models
and can keep you from being a sponge for this nonsense they're teaching, that is a powerful thing. Not everybody's blessed with this free thinking, critical thinking. Like, I came out the womb, I think he's like, my grandma's like, oh, you've been here before, type of deal, right? But everybody doesn't have
they're old souls. I think that is true.
Yeah, definitely. So I think that's one thing we need to hit on. So it is not beneficial to be taught that you can't succeed because of the color of your skin. And in fact, the whole civil rights movement, no matter how you feel about it, was against that whole notion that your skin color determines the amount of success you can have in your life. So now we're just reversing it. It's almost like history, what Mark Twain says, or history doesn't repeat, but it sure does rhyme, right? That is what you're seeing right now. We're going in circles, a big old circle.
That's why I said, if I were a white supremacist overlord, I can't think of a better way.
Oh, this is a wet dream for them.
I can't think of a better way to permanently subjugate people and have a permanent underclass of people who are basically helpless. And it's actually really scary because the literacy rates have just plummeted. That's another myth. Most people don't know the history of education in America, will believe what they're told, in that, there's always been this discrepancy or achievement gap, and that the reason we can't close it is because of racism and money. And in fact, it has not always existed. That is a lie. If you go back to even Baltimore, there used to be a superb high school in Baltimore way back in the day when Walter Williams was like a little boy, right? That turned out more PhDs and more, college graduates and doctors and all this kind of stuff, even a Supreme Court justice, I believe, or was that the DC school, but, in that area, because, and I know people might hear this in the wrong way, and I don't mean this as I'm not pro segregation. Don't hear that. But it was still during segregation. And what I think happened is that during segregation, you had Black teachers teaching Black kids. Okay. And, they taught what they needed to learn. It was kind of like, all right, here's what you need to know. And they were really keyed in on excellence, like the way out of this life. And, whatever is wrong right now. And the way we're going to overcome is through knowledge. Right. We're going to, we're just going to get there because all you kids are going to learn. And they were outperforming. If you're looking at socioeconomic class, they were outperforming white kids at the same socioeconomic class. Mm-hmm. And then came forced integration. There's a big difference between desegregating schools and saying, hey, you move in the neighborhood, you go to school, or you want to go to college, go to the college. Okay. No one's in your way. No one's literally standing in your way. And the law is open up and you're now equal under the law. But instead, they said, and now, boys and girls, we're going to stick you on a bus at 6 o'clock in the morning and shoot you halfway across the state so you can be sitting next to a white kid. Like somehow there's some kind of magic in doing that. When remember, they weren't doing poorly. The school buildings were crappier and they didn't have as nice books and stuff like that. And so desegregation should have fixed that because they should have done better with the funding.
More money. Yeah, exactly.
Right. But guess what they didn't do? They didn't change the funding structure. They just used money to buy buses and pay for freaking buses and bus them all over creation. And now you're this bleary-eyed little kid. You get up and you're like, but the school's right there, Mama. No, right over there. And here's the other thing is you don't change people's hearts and minds overnight.
Right. So you're getting taught by the teachers who probably don't want you there.
And you're in the neighborhood where they didn't want you there. This was in Boston. Mm-hmm. We saw that with they were protesting and throwing things. Imagine being a little kid on a bus and you're being bussed into Southie and these white racist people are throwing fruit and stuff at your butt. This was cruel. This was stupid. This was like, white Harvard graduates sitting around in an office somewhere discussing how they were going to solve problems for the little people. And they probably didn't even know any of these people. They probably never went to their neighborhoods because if they just left people the hell alone.
Fine.
Okay. And instead we got to get all up in people's business. And so now the same people that broke education. I mean, not that education was ever really awesome to begin with, but the people who make the problems come along and tell you they're going to fix the problem that they made.
Yep.
And I can guarantee you they're making this problem exponentially worse.
I've been saying it for forever, and it's kind of, oxymoronic coming from my background and but everything the government touches turns to shit. It's just the fact of the matter. The last thing you do want is them to fix anything, particularly if they create the problem in order to have to fix it. It is so asinine that I can't believe. And it's funny too, because you have people now who are, I seen something the other day, kind of off topic, but it kind of fits in too as well. I was listening to Jimmy Dore the other day. Jimmy Dore hits and misses sometimes, right. But one thing he hit on, he said is that Medicare for all, if we had that during the pandemic, it would be 200,000 less deaths. And I'm like, does Medicare for all? I'll agree. If you get cancer, you shouldn't have to mortgage your house to get treatment. That's just stupid. However, how does that create more doctors or create better medical care or create more nurses or create better doctors and better surgeons and better medication and make big pharma not want to charge the government $50 million for this medication to give to you? Like, how does that prevent people from dying? I don't get it. Why would you want more government? If you see Congress has a 10% approval rating or whatever, some ridiculous number, 15%, why would you want to give them more money, more power, more say over your daily life? It makes zero sense.
Well, people keep thinking health insurance is health care. And what you just pointed out is exactly that it's not. Health care comes from humans.
Yeah.
And there was a time where we seemed to understand that the government owning humans, or owning the labor of humans making that a right, you have a right to someone's labor. That's kind of a no-no. We don't do that in America.
Speaking on that, I seen somebody, a leftist, clamoring for federal job guarantees. I said, are you nuts, dude? They had it at one time. It was called slavery. You were
Yep.
guaranteed a job. It was called black codes. Matter of fact, in the South, if you weren't working or if you wasn't, going to work somewhere, you couldn't even gather on the corner. Like that was against the law. You had to be at your federal guaranteed. Not that it was federal, but you had to be at your guaranteed job, right?
Yep, 100%. You couldn't be a vagrant. You couldn't loiter. You couldn't be indigent, or you'd be run out of town, literally. I mean, I thought that reform was, making it so you were voluntarily employed, and that means you might be voluntarily unemployed. But guess what? That's why you take it upon yourself. Yeah, I tell people all the time, what these leftists don't get is the natural state of man. When you come into this world, naked and screaming, that's your natural state, is poor. Like anything you have is from your parents who presumably work for it. And they'll go, no, people are rich and they inherited it. Okay. Yeah, that sometimes does happen. But somebody along the way worked to get to that. It's not like unless they're kings and queens.
Yeah,
most people started off at some point somewhere down the line. Okay. So you're not, none of us is guaranteed anything. And I'm a classic example because I told you my background and I grew up, privileged in private schools and all this stuff. Right. Well, that didn't last because, my dad is one of those people. He's of the opinion that you're 18 years old and you're like, bye-bye. It's not my money. It's his money. Right. And he felt very strongly that we should stand on our own 2 feet and so forth and so on. So I worked my butt off. I mean, I got my first job at 15, the summertime, he was always like, where are you working? So I was like, I had summer jobs. Then as soon as I was 18, it was like, bye, get out, not get out. Like I want you here, but now you're an adult. You got to go, you're in college or you're living in an apartment. So I had a room at home I could sleep in, but it was like guest room. And I've been on my own and I changed jobs so many times, as I told you, because of my big mouth. And when you're like this and you do get fired a lot, or you have to bounce around, your resume looks like a roadmap and you don't really build a career. In other words, I wasn't going to be the person who kept making more and more and more and more. Because remember, I came out of college, I had no skill. Any skills I have, it's like all up in here. So it's only what I can convince people I can do. And I have lots of other little skills, but they're not big money making skills. That's why college is a big lie. Like there are not that many people who want to pay you to just know things or be, intelligent. They want to know, can you do something? What can you do? And really, there wasn't much I could actually do. And so I never really, broke through that like $35,000 mark, whatever. So as an adult, I was not a person who had money. I was always a person who was like paycheck to paycheck to paycheck to paycheck. And there were a couple of years where it was like I was borrowing money to buy grocery, like, I'm credit cards to pay the credit cards to buy the, I've been there. And people will say, it's called a snapshot fallacy. When you look at somebody, let's say, who is born into privilege and you go, well, everything's going to go great for them because they're born here. It's like, you're assuming so many things. You're assuming they're going to use those privileges wisely. They're not going to get drug addicted and be an idiot. Drive their car into a tree and be paralyzed, or any number of other stupid things that could happen. You're assuming they're not going to fall in bad times. Something bad happens. You're assuming so many things that you just can't assume. Just like you don't look at somebody who's growing up in, with a single mom and they're living in a housing project, whatever. You can't assume that's always going to be their life.
Exactly.
Especially in the United States. That was the American dream. What I keep telling people is the American dream is not a house and a picket fence and 2.5 kids. The American dream is not having a big career and a fancy car. The American dream is that no one is going to get in your way of you doing what you want to do that is not going to hurt anybody else, and just living your life on your terms. There are people who don't want to be wealthy. There are people who want to just live in a nice small house that's easy to maintain because they want to travel. Or maybe they just have a studio apartment because they want to travel. Or they don't even own a car because they can walk everywhere. People want lots of different things. We don't all want the same exact thing.
There you go. Yeah.
But America's dream is that you can do that. You can do that. And the government's not going to come along and go, you got to work in the coal mine. No, I'm sorry. You can't sit and write the great American novel in your cabin in the woods with your bicycle, because we need you to work and that your guaranteed income is through that place. And we need you to go make coal so we can make power. So go. I mean, that's like, the Hunger Games.
Yeah. That's your federal job guarantee right there.
The government that can give you all the stuff you need for your basic needs is the same one that can order you to do what it wants you to do. And we're seeing that right now. We're seeing the tip of the iceberg of what that looks like. And education is the solution. And I don't mean education in a school. I mean, I want parents to realize that your children are only going to be free. They're going to someday be going, Mom, tell me what it was like to be free, unless you get your kids out from the government's clutches and figure out a way for them to learn what they need to learn away from the government, because the government is trying to rewire their brain to serve the government. And that's it. All this activism, all this stuff is just a distraction to get your kids away from you, because you're the only one who can keep them, their brain safe, and away from the proper principles of liberty. That's it. And then they own them. They own them like slaves. It's just a new plantation.
Exactly. Big facts. What was this? What was the saying? Give me the child before they hit 7 and I'll show you the man or whatever. That's what you're saying, indoctrination. The earlier the better. Right now they're talking about starting them at 3 now. They're talking about a new program. Because every kid deserves pre-kindergarten, right? Because right now you have some programs, but they're not for everybody, right? We're gonna make it so everybody. We want to get you at 3 years old because both your parents have to go, slave away, wage slavery, and we want to get you even earlier at 3 years old. So from 3 to, if you go to college, from 3 to the age of 22,
right?
You spend majority of your time with strangers telling you what to think.
I think we need to go backwards a few decades to the place where people were relying on their relatives, their neighbors, their friends to help pull your resources. You can watch the kids today. I'm going to go to work today. I'll watch your kids tomorrow. Like, where you just figure it out to the point where you guys are raising the kids, not the government. You don't want the government parenting your children, because the government does not have the same interest and love for your children that you do. And it doesn't matter how poor you might be. That love is way more important to them than being in a school building with books and teachers and this and that and the other. That's not going to ever replace, especially a 3-year-old. I believe very strongly that kids should be with their parents, or mom in particular, at least till 7, minimum.
I agree. Well, I'm not gonna hold you too much longer. I went over the time. I know I held you up.
Okay. No, I'm blabbing away. I don't know if it's like what you wanted for your show, but
great knowledge. And like I said, I'm gonna have to coach you on again, because I still got a couple topics. I gotta pick your brain. I love the way you think. I love the way you present the arguments. So, but this last minute, I'm gonna let you plug your channel, plug whatever you want to plug. If you have any events coming up, you can let the audience know. It's your time to shine. So.
So I have a locals community, and we didn't get to talk about homeschooling during the show, but I do want people watching to know that it is part of my mission, not just to educate people about how lousy the schools are, but to try to help provide you with help to leave. So I'm not just going to talk about problems and complain. I'm actually trying to help people get the heck out. So what I have is I offer it through my locals, because I think that's the biggest bang for your buck. I mean, you could hire me hourly to be your little homeschool concierge. I can do that too, but it's free to join and just kind of see what's going on in there. But as a perk of, like, I think it's like $5 a month or something, or $50 for the whole year, what people can do is I have 2 Zoom calls a week, where I'm just sitting there and people come on. Usually it can be like 5-6 people come on, and they ask me questions. They're like, okay, so I'm looking at homeschooling, but I'm not sure, should I do this or that or whatever. They ask me questions, or they show me what they're doing and they get feedback. Some people just want moral support. They're just like, today was a rough day and I'm not sure, because you'll have rough days. Or my kid doesn't want to do it. What should I do? These kinds of things. So we talk about all things related to education. Basically, whoever shows up, what we talk about. And then I also have a thread in that locals where I do research for people. So if you're a supporter and you have a question, like, can you help me find a co-op in such and such a state? If I can do 15 minutes worth of research for you, and I will do it for you and write what I find. Whatever I find in 15 minutes, you get, and there's no limit on how many of those. So you could ask me, 10 questions, where I'm not going to say, oh yeah, you got too many questions. I just want people to get the help. Members there also do get a discount on tutoring. So if they had a student or like, I need some tutoring, they do get a discount on my hourly rate, and it's a pretty big one. So all that stuff is in the locals, and it's just my way of being able to help more people with, and still have it work for me too. Right. And otherwise, it's just I do interviews on the channel. If you are a person who wants to come on and talk to me on my channel, if you want to come, you personally, Dave, if you want to come on my channel and talk about anything that's related to education
Don't get
or
me
your own
started.
experience
Don't
in
get me
education.
started, because I come over there.
I'm always looking for different perspectives. You know, their parents have had all kinds of different issues that have gone on with their kids in the schools, and they have a story to tell. And they're like, you know what? I think your listeners will want to hear what happened to me and my kid. I'm open to that because we have to help each other.
Right.
And I'm trying to platform anybody who thinks they can either provide help or who needs to get some help from the audience. And that's basically what I'm doing. And you know, I might start a book club. We want to read Race Crazy as a group. I think that would be really fun. If Charles Love's new book, it's got a lot of great info in there. And other than that, nothing major coming up. But I will come back happily and talk more in detail about homeschool if you want me to.
Definitely.
But that's up to you.
Oh, it's gonna happen. You should never offered. I'm gonna take you up every time. But I have to thank you once again for
You're so
coming
welcome.
on. I'm gonna get you again, hopefully, and please shoot me that information for everything you're doing on side. I want to put that in the show notes as well.
Yeah, it's just the reason we learn.locals.com.
All right. So on behalf of Amy, who's out enjoying the football game, you know, I'm mad at you, Amy. But on behalf of the New Dystopia podcast,
Glad I missed that. No.
I gotta say thank you once again, and we're out. Peace.
Welcome to the edge of the hole of abyss where we stand on the ledge and we hope we don't slip. Where we all trying to cope, not focused on shit. Always scoped on the fix that is fixed to our wrist. And the cyst that persists from the clicks that we get is a ship that's adrift in the midst of the grift. What a trip, what a gift. What I miss? Shit. Ignorance is bliss. Bliss.
Welcome to the realm where they complicate pursuits, confiscate the truth to indoctrinate the youth. Got us hopped up on the juice cause the doctor's about to loot. Posture of imposters cause our options are acute. Playing possum for the boot, it's lost in the obtuse. You constantly accosted for the optics you can prove. Animosity's the obstacle.